to order, and have a lot of interesting items on the agenda. Waiting for a great presentation also later on in the agenda. So a lot of good things are happening. This, as they say, is Decision Day across America. I hope that you've all voted. I hope that everybody has gone out and voted for their candidate of their choice that will make America great again. Just vote. Very good. That being said, is there any other board members have any comments to make at this time? Any remarks from anybody? If not, then I'm going to call on Anita Cloud to come and pray for us this morning. Pray for our state and our nation as well, if you will.
Good morning. I would like for us all to remember what is found in the book of Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under the heavens. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning, just thanking you for being the awesome God that you are. Thanking you for blessing us and bringing us into this new day. Now we ask that you forgive us of all of our sins and our iniquities. And then, Lord, we ask that you bless us as we prepare not only for a change in this nation, we prepare for a change in this state. And then, Lord, we ask that you bless this agency, that you endow the leaders of this agency with your godly wisdom, that you empower them to move us into the next stage. Then, Lord, we ask that you bless this entire body as a whole. This is our prayer this morning in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Anita. The first item of business is the agenda. Each of you have been emailed the agenda, but if you have any comments or questions about the agenda or the additions, now would be the time. Otherwise, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The agenda has been adopted. Our first item for business is the minutes from October 4th of 2016. Those minutes were also sent to you. After reviewing those minutes, are there any corrections or amendments needing to be made to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And ayes clearly have it. Second item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes from our special call meeting, which was the clemency hearing for Gregory Paul Lawler. Those minutes were also emailed to each member. If there are no additions, is there a motion that we adopt?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Very good. We have some older business or unfinished business on the table at this time. If you remember last board meeting, a couple of provisional ballots were brought before the board on a couple of items. This time I'll yield to the attorney, our board's attorney, Condra Smith, to tell us the results of that and where we're at and what posture we're in this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the last board meeting, there were three amendments proposed to different board rules. The first one being Board Rule 475-1-.01 with regard to paragraph 4 of that rule, essentially to eliminate certain verbiage and add certain verbiage. Delete the word offices, delete the phrase at field offices located throughout the state, and add the World Board's website as a place for the public to obtain additional information, since we no longer have field offices throughout the state. There's been no written public comment received on this bill so far, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we provisionally adopted it, set it out as according to the Administrative Procedures Act, 30 days to wait for public comments. And I understand that you said at this time we've had no public comments on the initiative.
None in writing.
Is there any public comments wishing to be made on this initiative only at this time? Is there any public comments? Hearing no public comments on before the board is Board Rule 475-1-01. What's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
There's a motion.
Second.
And there's a second. I assume that is to adopt.
To adopt.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Smith.
The second rule is Board Rule 475-2-.01, paragraph 2, to delete the phrase supervised by the board staff and replace it with under board order supervision. because the parole board no longer supervises parolees, and this provides for the payment of a supervision fee of $30 for each month that they are under board-ordered supervision. No public comment has been received thus far on this rule item.
Okay, once again, and in the same position as we were in the last motion, this is a board rule change which requires to be acted under the Administrative Procedure Act. The board provisionally adopted it 30 days or so ago. It's been put out for public comments. I understand our attorney says it's, as of right now, there have been no public reactions to the measure. Is there public comments on this measure only at this time? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move we adopt the rule as proposed.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Third, is it the third?
Third and last, Board Rule 475-3.05, paragraph 1 regarding consideration for parole. In most cases, for those inmates that are eligible for parole under Georgia law, consideration for parole is automatic and no application is necessary. However, over the course of the last legislative session, there has been a law that made certain offenders that are sentenced as recidivists and not parole eligible, they can become parole eligible under certain criteria. And the proposed amendment to this rule would be to allow or mandate that those offenders who are currently not parole eligible because of their recidivist status, in the event they later become parole eligible once meeting certain static and dynamic criteria, they apply for consideration before the parole board. There's been no public comment on this rule either, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. So our third rule change also follows the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act. We provisionally adopted this over 30 days ago. It's been placed before the public. I understand, according to the board's attorney, there has been no public comment, no request of the board rule. Are there public comments on this rule at this time, this rule only? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move to adopt.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. The motion carries. Thank you. That's it, huh?
That's it.
All right. Our next item of business will come under new business, which are some new policy changes. We'll call on Chris Kemner to come and explain those proposals. Okay, it looks like our first, if I have these in order, our first item is number 2.106. If you will explain.
Case record management. Field operations has now been changed to services to policy. Section 1.15.1. Responsibility of field division or field service division has been changed to the violations portion of particular information. In section 1.106.2 and 1.106.4, reference to the field operations manual has not been removed. In 1.106.3, the term as it relates to violations, as it describes what's maintained and releasing electronic files. And all sections under 1.106 procedure have been renumbered.
So this is pretty much still cleanup from the exiting or the creation of DCS.
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions of the members? What's the pleasure of the board on the adoption or denial?
Move we adopt.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, motion carries. Our second item is policy number 2.102, which deals with warrantless searches and the disposition of confiscated property.
Yes, sir. Second and final board policy revision. Board policy 2.1201, searches, disposition, of confiscated property. In section 1.102, the term and procedures was removed, as we are also removing reference to the field operations manual within this policy. 1.105.3, terminology that states the property will be stored at a parole office has now been removed and replaced with Department of Community Supervision. Also, all sections under 1.105 have been renumbered, and 1.106 has been removed since it refers to the workload operations.
So once again, this is just cleaning up from the exodus or the creation of DCS. There's nothing new in the policy proposal.
No, sir.
Okay. Any questions from the members? What's the pleasure of the board?
Move to adopt.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there any others?
No, sir.
Very good. Thank you. So we'll call on our director at this time, Christopher Barnett, to give the director's report.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to start off this morning by saying thank you for your leadership and support and guidance. It's been a great month for the Pro Board since we last met in October the 4th of this year. We continue to push our 4 operational priorities, and that is engaging our stakeholders, encouraging their active participation, educating where we can, and then enhancing the operations of parole here in Georgia. I would like to defer my time today to some of my divisional directors and a guest speaker that we have, if that is okay with the board.
Sure.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to call on Director of Clemency, Bubba Wood.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, board.
Morning.
Members, I just want to take a couple of minutes to, y'all already aware of it, but we went to Alabama State Prison for a very memorable experience last week. And a lot of the clemency workers, they will go to these prisons, to the graduations, to the lifers group, present to them. And what we try to do is make the connection that what you're doing in prison really matters. It's not just filling time. It's not just making you go over here or go over there. And I think sometimes the people who are in prison, they don't make the connection. They have a hard time making it. So we try to give them a face and let them know we really are watching what you're doing, and what you do in prison does matter. We went to Albertus in Forsyth, and there was one of the first graduates of the charter school there in Forsyth was listening to the board members as they spoke and watching what we had to say. But one of them didn't know it, but his parole had been set. And we presented it to him there in front of his fellow inmates in the middle of the ceremony. And there's been a few times in my career that you see things that happen, and it's big things that happen. When you see somebody that is affected and has a real change for the better, it's something that you don't forget. And I won't ever forget last week. It was a very memorable, touching moment. And on the working side of things, it did impress the other inmates who were thinking, I'm sure, dang, I wish I had got my education before the board came.
Some good news.
But this gentleman had outstanding records, letters of support from security, from counselors, from the warden. He'd done like he was supposed to do. He attended like he was supposed to. No disciplinary reports, and he had conducted himself well. And as the governor has said, and as Chris has brought up so many times, you know, people can earn their way into prison, and they can earn their way out of prison. And this gentleman earned his way out of prison. So the staff, I mean, I can't say it enough. Clemency staff, they do a good job. They work hard. They are flexible. They're smart. So enough about me. No. I do appreciate it. I want to recognize Scott Reeves, my assistant director, and Carol Dean. I always try to point them out because they keep me out of boiling water a lot. So anyway, it was a very memorable moment, and just wanted to remind everybody that we get so caught up in processes sometimes. The way we do things, what are we pushing, what are we trying to do? But it's connected to many lives, victims, inmates, mamas, daddies, sisters. I mean, we're all connected with this, so we try to do a good job, and the other day was a very good job. I'll tell you, it was very impressive. So if you don't have any questions for me, I will.
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that.
Good job, Bubba. I asked Bubba to share that with the public here in this setting, because it truly does highlight to the board and to the staff that those files and those numbers that we deal with every single day, that there's an actual person behind that. And I don't think we can ever lose sight of that human aspect of what we do. And to realize there's folks sitting in sales today that hope we do the best job we can. And there's folks outside that fence line that hope that we do what we've been tasked to do and make the right decision. So again, thank you for that opportunity to be there last week. At this time, another community engagement program that we've just completed. I'd ask Shalandra Robinson to come up and talk about Victim Visitors Day.
Shalandra.
You see the media on that? The birds.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, covered in the one or two. Channel 2, Channel 5. Oh, I know.
Good morning, Shalandra.
I just have a short little presentation. As you know, last month I told you about our Victim Visitor Days and the plans that we had for that day. I also shared with you that at that time we were on schedule to have the largest number of victims to attend the Victim Visitor Day since we've been doing it in 2006. Well, we didn't beat the record for the number of individuals. However, we did beat the number of cases. This is the first time the board has actually reviewed 100 cases at scheduled Victim Visitor Day. So with that being said, I'll just go, if you turn and see the presentation. These are just, this is the exit survey.
What was the second highest caseloads? Do you recall?
The second highest, I have that in this report. I'll skip to it. We had 214 individuals to attend this one, and you reviewed 100 cases. And the second in Jonesboro, Clayton County, earlier this year, we saw 223 individuals, but that represented 86 cases.
Okay, good.
So the event is definitely growing. So here, that's why I have those numbers that I just shared with you. The 214 individuals represent the 100 cases. Another thing we started looking at, we were seeing that we had people coming from all over, not only the judicial circuit in which we actually targeted that particular group, but we realized that we're getting victims from all over the state, as well as from other states. For this particular event, 34 counties across Georgia, and from 4 different states. So we had family members from these 34 counties. We had 2 families from Alabama, 1 from Florida, 1 from North Carolina, 1 from Tennessee. And we usually see numbers like that after each of the events.
So this is pretty common. You generally get all across the state coming.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if you look at the stats to see if there's any particular Victims Visitors Day would drew more people from other places in the state, or if they're all pretty much average alike.
I'm not sure. We just started keeping up with that number. I can recall one event that we did, the big one down in Forsyth, when we did a partnership with the 12 other state agencies. I know we had a large number of victims coming from other states at that particular. That was a couple of years ago. Right here, I believe it's you, Mr. Barnett, that asked about the crime types that we were seeing. And on this page, you'll see that 36% of the cases that you saw were murder cases. And it goes down, 19% aggravated assault, child molestation. One thing that we found interesting, in certain parts of the state, you'll see certain types of crimes. It was interesting. I, found that a large number of murder cases that we saw in this particular area. We asked the victims, how did you find out about this event? 50% told us that they found out through the Georgia Office of Victim Services, through our office, and 45% found out through the DA's office, through their advocates.
Wow.
We also asked if my time here was well spent. As you can see, 97% of the victims in attendance strongly agree that their time was well spent. How would you rate our level of customer service? 97% rated our level of customer service above average or excellent for this event. Parole Board Corrections DCS employee I spoke with was courteous. 97% agreed. Another thing we try to look at is the how long the victims have to wait before they are seen. 55% 15 minutes or less, and 8% said they waited over 60 minutes. And I think that number comes from the fact that a large number of the victims actually attended the opening ceremony. We schedule the appointments. We try to do at least 5 every 30 minutes. But for this particular event, and I think I can attribute that to the advocates, the local advocates, they encourage the victims to come to the opening ceremony.
Yeah, that was a bit unusual. Of all the many I've gone to, I don't think I've seen so many victims in an opening ceremony.
I think that with the exception of the events that we were doing with the partnership in Versailles, that is, I would say that is the largest number I've seen. We asked if the victims, if all of my questions were answered. 100% said they felt that their questions were answered. That I would recommend other crime victims and their families to attend a victim visitors day like this. 100% of the victims in attendance said that they would. I think I failed to say this. The exit surveys are conducted by the leadership with the Department of Community Supervision. And one of the things we asked them, I know Harris, you were part of that group as well. We asked them to kind of write down exactly, we want the direct quote from the victims. And so we placed those direct quotes from the victims with the question, when asked, what did you like most about your experience here today? And we just kind of highlighted some of them, and I'll just point out a couple. When asked, what did you like most about your experience today? One victim said, was able to share exactly how I feel about the tragedy that occurred that day. I was able to speak to someone in person rather than mail a letter. Another one said, feel safe and have peace of mind, answered all my questions, and I am clear on how parole works. Able to meet with the board face to face, bring up concerns. It was personal instead of generic, felt genuine concern rather than smoke and mirrors. And as you can see throughout this survey, those are the kind of comments that we got. All of my questions were answered today. It was very informative. The opportunity to speak to the people we need to, opportunity to express the after effect of the crime, very informative. You'll see comments like that throughout this report. Professionalism, well managed, the opening session and hearing from the victims, the experience as a whole. So you'll see, we can put all of those comments in the survey. So at your leisure, you can kind of read those. Another question we asked, please tell us how we can improve. And you'll see from this report, the majority of them said no suggestions, that it was well organized, try to do it more often. So nothing is great, just keep me informed and I'll keep attending. Not one thing for me, a lot of time and work goes into this, I can tell. Nothing, it was very nice. So those are the comments that you'll see when we ask, how can we improve? One thing that the staff and I always laugh about, no matter what and where we are, there always somebody makes a comment about the lunch. You know, either, you know, barbecue was dry or y'all should have more sandwiches. You know, we always get a comment about lunch. I think in this particular, even though y'all know the food was outstanding.
It was.
The home cooked meal that they provided for the staff. But it never fails. We always get a comment from the victims about how we can improve with the lunch. The next one, you'll see, we started Victim Visitors Day in 2006. Since that time, we've seen 3,218 victims and or their families. They've attended these events. And that's just a list of the places that we've been when we attended, and the total in attendance. And you can see, Mr. Barnett, we just started counting the number of cases back in Columbus, and I think you made that recommendation for us to start doing that. Upcoming events, we're hoping to go to Atlanta. At the last clemency hearing, I spoke with DA Paul Howard and shared with him our interest in coming to the metro area, and he seemed to be excited. He wants us there. And we're also going to look, we've been trying to get to Augusta now for the past couple of years, so hopefully next year we'll be able to go to Augusta as well.
Oh.
Any questions about the survey?
So this is an amazing report. I really appreciate you taking the time to put it together. It really sort of tells the story. You often wonder, are you making a difference from time to time? And I think that you case profiled that here today.
I like to say this is consistent. This is what we see every time we hold these events, and these are the kind of comments that we get. And I would like to take just a couple more minutes just to say thank you, number one, to you, the board, because if that is the selling point, that's what we share with victims. This is your opportunity to meet face to face with the board member. And as you can tell from the comments, throughout the comments, you'll see, I got an opportunity to talk to a board member. I got an opportunity to talk to a board member. And it's effective. You can tell it's working. Another thing that I noticed with this particular report, a lot of them said they learned about the parole process. So that may be something we're seeing a little different now. Maybe the book, you are actually informing them about the process, how the process works. And as you know, the more information you provide, the better it is for us when we get those phone calls.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So when they're in the waiting room, in the waiting area, what's typically going on when they're waiting? Is there may be an opportunity to capture and maybe give a parole one-on-one or something like that?
If you notice, we always have a warden from corrections. We have the leadership from GCS now. And so we'll have the warden, the transition center superintendent. They'll talk about prison life. They'll answer any generic type questions that the victims may have about prisons, transitional centers. And I believe on this time we actually had someone from clemency to talk about the clemency process. I believe, can we have somebody in there with the clemency? To talk about the clemency, the parole process. So we try to have someone in there to kind of talk about the different agencies that are represented.
Yeah, this is good news. You've got people starting to feel a little more comfortable with knowing how the process works, which is something maybe the parole hasn't done as good a job in the years past with. We've been making a concerted effort to make sure that people understand the process a little clearer, so that, as they say, the boogeyman disappear by doing that, helping out.
And that's one of the things that we're trying to do with our victim support partners. Unfortunately, we didn't have any that were able to attend in Milledgeville, but we've had trainings with them and explain the parole process to them. So now we have victims who are actually able to talk to other victims, not only about their experience in dealing with the parole board or the Office of Victim Services, but also about the process and how parole works. When you get this letter, this is what that means. So we're educating victims to educate others.
It seemed like we had a lot more new faces at this particular event than some of the events in the past.
We did. And I attribute that to the local advocates. I can honestly say this is the first time that we've had advocates that just really, you can see 49% of the victims said they found out through the local advocate. And I think this is probably the first time we've had that many.
Well, I know many of the members had their own experiences, and I saw a lot of folks myself that day. But not only were they needing to talk to me, I found that they had needed to talk to corrections that day as well. And so we brought in this corrections, and DCS was also required. There were some questions about, well, if this person's paroled, how will he be supervised? We brought DCS involved in that. There were even legal questions that came up, which I had to bring our own attorney in to help solve some of those, at least point them for different directions. So it was a very successful event as far as I could tell for getting information out.
And I don't know, hopefully it means it's getting better and better. You know, we're learning from each event. And but along with that, I think having the full support from DA Brad, you know, from day one, as I stated back in October, he was there. And he brought in his staff and he said, whatever the needs are, you know, we're in.
Yeah, I think this was the model. I think that if you can build on this model and other DAs can understand how successful this meeting was in Milledgeville, this will just get better as we go along.
Good job.
Thank you. Also want to say thank you to Bubba and the clemency staff. We definitely couldn't do it without you. But I also want to take the opportunity to recognize the Office of Victim Services staff. This is Daryl Reed. Some of you may have seen him around. Daryl is on loan to our office from Department of Corrections. Came to us in June of this year. And kind of just threw everything on him. I told him he was going to take the lead for this particular program because he's from Milledgeville. And I just want to recognize Daryl. He did an excellent job, as you just see what
Yes, get him.
Next is Cassandra Abdullah. Actually, this is Cassandra's, tomorrow will be Cassandra's last day. She just accepted a position with the federal government, with VA. She's going to be a behavior health scientist with the Veterans Administration. So I want to take the opportunity just to let her know we do appreciate all the hard work that she gave to the Office of Victim Services. And Janelle Edwards. We couldn't do anything without Janelle. I think DA Bradley started thinking Janelle was the director of Victim Services.
Well.
No, I could not do this job without Janelle. She is absolutely the best. Destiny Brown is out on security duty. Destiny is on loan to our office from Department of Community Supervision. And I think everyone knows Kier Chapel. Kier is actually down in Forsyth, finishing up a victim offender dialogue workshop along with Patricia Smith. She's down there as well. Patricia's on loan from Department of Corrections. Tiffany Brown is on leave, and Anais is actually in school. You met Anais last month. She's in school this week. So that's the Office of Victim Services. And again, it's a lot of work goes into these programs, and these guys work extremely hard. And I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to them.
Yeah, thank you, Victim Services.
Well, now, Shalandra left off one person, and that's herself. So
Well, we should probably give her a big hand too.
it takes a tremendous amount of coordination, hours of phone calls and talking to victims and coordinating with our stakeholders to pull off this event. And I'm impressed every time we go. It just seems like it gets better and better and better each time. So thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Fantastic. And at this time, I'm going to call on Field Services Director Rick Jacobs for him to come up and introduce our special guest today.
Okay.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Chairman, Board, good morning.
Morning.
Before I bring up Ms. Lindsay, I want to just thank you on behalf of Field Services Division staff and our leadership, Ms. Jenna James, Admin Operations Coordinator, and Ms. Felicia Holloway back here, our Deputy Director. Great crew right there. They are absolutely outstanding. But we want to just, as a whole, want to thank you, each one of you individually, and as a whole, for your great support and encouragement as we continue to move forward in field services, kind of re-engineering what field services look like and what we aim to accomplish each and every day when it comes to public safety, and not only that, protecting this board. And I personally want to say thank you for that. Secondly, I want to thank you again for covering additional hearings in the month of November and December. I know we poured a lot on you, but as we go into these 2 holiday months back to back, we lost a couple of Wednesdays of hearings. And so I appreciate your support and helping us provide that coverage there. At this time, I want to introduce Miss Lindsay Eschenbach. Everybody got that in case you call out her name? You should have heard Miss Strickland downstairs trying to figure it out.
Miss Lindsay.
Yeah, you got my secret. That's why I said Miss Lindsay there. Just say a few words about her. I met her first in 2011. In 2011, at the Georgia Department of Corrections, ran into her, and she began her career with the corrections as a probation officer, worked her way up as a supervising officer in high-risk areas of supervision and other areas. They quickly learned that she excelled in a lot of the things that they were asking her to do. She then began seeking further jobs in the Department of Corrections. She is currently assigned as a Criminal Intelligence Analyst 3, the supervising agent for the Office of Professional Standards with the Georgia Department of Corrections. And what she's going to do today is provide you a general presentation regarding not only the use of cell phones in drug transactions within the prison system, but also give you a general overview of the trends and the drugs that not only face parolees as they are in the communities, but also inmates within the Georgia prison system. And also she'll kind of close out with how the drug transactions are made through green dot cards and those types of things in managing drug trade within the walls of the prison system. Ms. Lindsay, the floor is yours.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you all for having me. With the Georgia Department of Corrections, people say criminal intelligence analyst, and everyone's like, what is that? What do y'all do? So pretty much our day-to-day job, we work in the Office of Professional Standards. We work directly with our special agents and investigators. We provide trends, intelligence regarding the criminal aspects of what we're seeing going on in the prisons and out on the streets. And we work directly with the DEA, with GSAC, GBI, FBI. We work directly with them, getting intel and receiving and giving intel to each other. So it's a great operation that we have as analysts and working in intelligence, and that's where we're moving into the future. And so it's been really cool to be a part of that. And with that, we get to see a lot of what's going on in our prisons. A lot of what happens are what has occurred in our prisons, and our number one problems that we have are drugs and cell phones. And with the cell phones comes drugs, because they're contacting each other using the cell phones out on the street. They're mostly, we're seeing probationers and parolees who are making the drops, providing the drugs, and getting these the contraband into our prisons. So when they get out, a lot of times they work together. They know that when they were in the system, they made a lot of money in prison, and it doesn't stop when they get out, unfortunately. So the top issues that we've seen are our entrance of contraband during our visitations. We've tried to combat that with a lot of different aspects of, we have a lot more canines that we've put in place to search out for the drugs, and making sure that no previous offenders are visiting our inmates. Also, our contraband drops outside the facilities in and around are a huge problem. Right now, we have a lot of local law enforcement monitoring the outside of our prisons, where we're seeing a huge problem, and making sure that these drops aren't continuously occurring. So that's where a lot of them are coming in. They'll use anything that you could possibly imagine to get them in, with drones or footballs or anything that you could really imagine to throw over a fence to get them in. And the problem that we're having is finding it. So if the wrong person finds it, or we don't find it, or an inmate gets to it quicker, then we have a problem. And then they get into the prison. My boss always likes to make a joke that our inmates aren't wanting to get out, that they'd rather just escape and come back, because they know they're going to make money in prison, because they're going to go out and get the drugs, and they're going to come back in with the drugs so they can make more money. So we also have a huge problem with staff entering contraband into our facilities. Obviously, it was on the news where we worked with the FBI to take down a lot of corrupt staff who are involved in these type of personal dealings and contraband. So this is a real problem. Staff can make more money providing contraband to inmates than what we can pay them. So we're always trying, we've put a lot of stuff in place to make sure that we're hiring staff that aren't being recruited by gangs, that aren't gonna fall victim to the drugs, or that is not their main goal when they're walking into our facility. So we're doing a lot of background investigations on them. Our unit personally does social media background checks on all of the COs that we hire now. So we're putting a lot of things in place, but they think quicker, they think faster, and we have a world full of criminals in our facilities, unfortunately. And there's a lot more of them than there are of us. Also, we have a lot of issues with mailroom contraband. They find a lot of different ways to bring drugs and contraband in through the mailroom. They can now put different which is later on in the packet that I handed y'all, they can now put a lot of different drugs on paper. So they're putting it on paper, and they can take it off of the paper and use it that way. So we're seeing, they get creative with what they do. You can manipulate drugs many different ways to make sure that they get into our facilities without being tracked. And also, a common problem we have is work detail inmates. They go out, they get the drugs, and they bring them back. And whether it's a civilian they get them from, or someone out, someone out on the street or whatever, they take them out, they bring them in, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the drugs coming into our prisons as well. All right. Actually, I put on your second slide there, we have a chart where in 2014 we had 2016 reports, and then in 2016, the state, we only had 1,200. Now, our investigations are showing a different picture, that we actually have more drugs that are going on in our prisons. But what the intel we have developed and received is that we're just having a harder time finding it. They're getting more creative, whether it's corrupt staff, whether we can't find it, whether we've had to redevelop our canine too, to work with them to sniff out the different drugs that are taking place or that are in our prisons. We're seeing a lot more, but we're having a harder time finding them in our facilities. I also did a breakdown of our top 5 facilities in which we're seeing a lot of drugs come into the facilities. Coffee Correctional Facility was our number 1 for 2016 thus far, with a lot higher over the next one, which was Ware, and they only had 71. Coffee has a lot of work detail inmates going in and out of Coffee, which is possibly why we're seeing a lot more drugs coming in and out of Coffee. Okay. The next slide that I have in front of y'all is a breakdown of the amounts of drugs that we have located in our prisons in and around. This is a new thing we developed this year, so unfortunately I can't compare it to last year, but we started this in 2016. And you see the leading that we have for 15,000 grams is marijuana. We're finding a great deal of marijuana. We're always hitting on marijuana. Marijuana is a huge provider in our prison. The second one is pills, finding random pills. The inmates, get during pill count, they get a lot of pills. They like to sell their pills. I have alcohol in there, but the third one is meth, of the drugs and we're seeing a huge surge of meth going on in the prisons. We monitor our inmate telephone calls, and they talk openly about needing to get meth into the prison, how much it's going for, and the different ways that they can get meth in and out of the prison. And the way they do it, I was just working a case the other day where he gave full detail on our recorded line, and it says it's recorded, but he gave full detail about how he was going to run his operation, and he would deposit, or the mom would get the money on the Green Dot card or a PayPal account. They would then deposit it onto a Western Union account, and the CO would walk up and get the money. Now, PayPal and Green Dot do not work well with law enforcement, so trying to subpoena their records and get a search warrant, they say they don't have the information. So it's a very intelligent way to do things, but savvy, but it makes it harder and harder each day to try to combat this. So we're having to go different routes. But he was dealing meth, and he was talking to his girlfriend on the phone, telling her, I have to have meth in the prison. That's what these guys want. This is what they need, and that's how I'm making all my money. So also, we're seeing some heroin, or the least amount was heroin and cocaine. We're seeing a great deal of cocaine go on too, as well.
So may I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So would you think that this individual who's making this open conversation is relatively comfortable in prison, would prefer to continue his organization there, or does he make more money in prison than if he were on the streets?
Yes. They openly say that they make more money in prison than they do out on the streets. They can't get a job. They're now a convicted felon. They have a harder time, but in prison, they have a cash flow. And that's why they sell the cell phones, they sell the drugs, and then they have a cash flow of money coming in and out. And this guy was a high-ranking gang member, and he has guys underneath him selling as well. And a great deal of the inmates make more money there than they could out here.
Wow. So he would be a classic recidivist in order to come back to prison to make more money, is what you're basically saying, in a sense.
Right.
That's wild.
Got more customers.
On the next page, I just did a breakdown of the different drugs that we test for, and kind of what they are or their uses. Because on the next slide, I did the positive drug test that we saw in October. Just so if y'all had any questions later on, y'all would know what drugs test for which. So the highest amount of positives that we had for the month of October was actually meth. And the crazy thing about meth is if you take meth, it's 2 to 3 days and then it's out of your system. So 39 in the month of October across our prisons is relatively high. It was even higher than marijuana. So this is a surge that we're seeing of people selling meth. Cocaine and marijuana were second, and then opiates, which is heroin and some other morphine, heroin, and methadone.
How long is marijuana in your system? How many days?
About a week, depending.
Does corrections follow the flow of money on inmates to predict as to who's selling and who's not selling?
Yes, and we watch our top financials and where the money's coming and going from. We also have a unit within OPS that is dedicated to financial crimes within our facilities. And they deal more so with that, but we keep an eye on the fluctuation and where the money is coming from as well. So if they got a life insurance claim or, in their account, that's not illegal. But if they got 15 different transactions coming from multiple different individuals in a matter of 2 months of thousands of dollars, then that raises a red flag. So we watch those and then we would freeze their accounts. But if they're doing it illegally and we find their green dot cards in their cells, which is typical, and we find the numbers, then we try to trace the money from there. But like I said, green dot doesn't work well with us, PayPal either, which they're doing it for.
Wow.
Is there a maximum that they can have in their inmate spending account?
No, there's not.
So it's just unlimited.
Mhm. On the next one, we have our investigations compared from 2015.
I have another question to follow up with that.
Yeah.
So someone that would appear they have an excessive amount. What's the average inmate have on their books compared to someone that you would say is excessive? One, and two, are those individuals that have an excessive amount, you kind of start looking at them towards your investigation or maybe try to figure out where some of this money and such is coming from?
So we check it monthly, and anything above $3,000 is what we check, because you would be surprised the amount of money that some people have in their inmate accounts. I mean, I'm talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a lot of those are settlements. And then there are some that, have 10,000, and those are more the individuals that are running scams, running those type of things.
What's the average inmate have on their book?
I'd say about 1,000.
When you mention hundreds of thousands in their account, is that their inmate account or is that a personal account in the bank down the street?
That's their inmate account. But
Really?
they treat it like a
Checking account?
checking account.
Sure.
So when they're released, then we just have to write them a check for 100.
Yeah, that's their money. Yeah.
But now your average $1,000 does not include any of the green dot
No.
or PayPal, because there's no way.
No. And we put a lot of things in place to combat, because before there was nothing written down that if the money was deposited, we had to know who it came from. So last year we were in a huge bid with JPay to make sure that if money was getting put on inmates' books, that it was from someone who was on their visitation list and was approved. But unfortunately, Western Union and Bank of America allow that to happen, to where anyone can walk up and put it on their book.
I see Rick is standing up. Are we complicating things, Rick?
Yeah, just a little, just for
I'm
clarity. No, we're good. Just for clarity, there are a lot of inmate accounts that are for valid reasons where they would have high amounts. She mentioned one, which is settlements. I've had inmates enter the prison system with $2.5 million settlements and payments coming monthly, regularly from their attorney on those settlements. Not only that, I've had inmates that had retired from like General Motors and had retirement checks coming in monthly for thousands of dollars for their annual retirement salary. So there are valid reasons why an inmate would have, several $1,000s on an account. I don't want it to appear that
They're doing it just enterprise.
Those kinds of
No, and we do look into those. We say, this is where this money came from. TC inmates are another thing. They're not paying any living expenses, so they have a great deal of money that's accumulated because they're working. But we go in and we say, this is where the money came from. We can confirm this. If we can't confirm it, then our financial investigators would then investigate what's happening in there.
Yeah, many of you realized I used to manage a bank, and it was a bank in an area where there were a lot of prisons. And the reason I asked the question about personal accounts is there were a lot of personal accounts, but large amounts as well that were owned. And of course, these personal accounts are probably money that was brought from an inheritance or whatever throughout the
And
process.
that does, I mean, and it does happen regularly where they get a great deal of money in settlements, inheritance, retirement.
Now, let me ask you about the Green Dot and the PayPal. Since you're saying that this is difficult because they're not cooperating, and maybe this is not the place to discuss this, but I'm just curious if the state's ever looked at trying to do their own system of payment and not do the third party in order to have a more cooperative opportunity.
Well, we're not using them, so the inmates are illegally.
Oh, so that's why it happens that they make their own choice.
And we use JPay as
Yeah.
a form of payment
Okay.
that they're supposed to be using. But if they're using it illegally, they use Green Dot, PayPal, any of those other smaller ones that you would see like at the, if you're checking out at CVS, they have little cards.
So-
They have multiple different
So that's how they hide their money, because those third
Right.
parties are willing to work with
Right,
them.
so they would hide the money they use it for only a matter of days, put the money on the account, they withdraw the money and then take it somewhere else.
I got you. All right, continue if you will.
Okay, I'm glad that y'all have questions.
Oh, yeah.
So on my next one, I have drug investigations that we had from 2015 to 2016. I'm so sorry that it's so small. I didn't see this one until, but in October, we're doing a lot of things with investigations, trying to combat our war against drugs in prisons. And you can see that in 2016, we had a yearly average of 31 so far, 31 cases on drugs alone. And in 2015, we had 22. So we're well above what we were. But this is also, we're fighting harder. We're giving harsher sentences for what we're seeing happening in there, and letting the inmates and staff know, hey, we're not going to accept this in our prisons. So I mentioned earlier about how drugs are being entered into our facilities and that it's getting more difficult to be able to find them. They're turning meth into a liquid form. I talked about it being drugs being put on paper as well, and also in a powder form. And so, just a couple of ones that we're seeing. Liquid meth is one that we're seeing coming in. It was originally put into liquid so that it could be transported more easily. And we have had several cases where people have found the liquid meth, not realize that that's what it is. And then we say, oh, wait, this isn't right. It doesn't look like alcohol. It's the wrong color. It's like a brownish color. Something's not right with it. So for transportation purposes, they turn it into a liquid, bring it into our facilities, and then use it that way.
What type of container are they bringing it in?
Water bottles, Coke bottles, any type of bottle.
So they may bring an entire 12 ounces, are you saying? In a
No,
water?
like throw it over like a bottle, just a liter.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you saying a liter?
Yeah.
A liter worth of liquid meth?
Yeah.
No.
Or like
way.
Okay. And then we're also seeing a surge on synthetic drugs. Synthetic drugs won't ever go away, I don't think. And we've had multiple cases where we couldn't prove that it is what happened, that someone took synthetic drugs, but it didn't make sense the way that they reacted. Someone said that they took something, they didn't know what they took, but your body reacts much differently to synthetic drugs than it would, say, cocaine or meth. So we've seen multiple reports of that, just haven't been able to prove it, that that's what they took. Heroin, we haven't had a lot of reports in heroin, but heroin is surging right now out on the streets. And kind of the trend that we see is if heroin, or if something is happening out on the streets, the facilities are delayed, but it will be a matter of months, and then they'll start bringing it into the facilities. So, and the thing about heroin is because of the way that it's being cut now, it's much cheaper, much easily accessible. And I think it'll be a matter of time before we start seeing more and more reports. I mean, we had some positive drug tests and we're finding some, but not nearly as much as what we're finding now in marijuana. I put fentanyl in here because I gave y'all a sheet that I just received from HIDA on fentanyl and and what's happening with fentanyl and how potent it is. And fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than what heroin is. It tests positive for opiates. And so we are seeing some drug tests positive for that. It's hard to know whether that's what they are using or not. But same thing with heroin. If it's out there, then they're going to get it. So in fentanyl, actually, if you touch fentanyl, it could actually kill you because of how potent and strong it is. So.
Wow.
And then methamphetamines, which is our largest drug that we currently have in our facilities that we're having the most problem with. The gangs are very involved in bringing methamphetamines into our prisons. People are being sent to prison, and then, you put them in these treatment programs, or not y'all, but we put them in treatment programs, and they're continuing to use meth because we're trying to stop meth getting in, but they get it in. Suboxone is one that they put on paper. It's used it's an opiate. It's usually used as a heroin or methadone treatment, but at higher doses it can be used for a high. So this is what we're seeing being brought in through the mailroom, put on paper. They then melt it down to be able to use it once they get it in. Some ways that we're currently trying to combat the drugs coming in. We work really closely with local PDs and sheriffs. As I told y'all that we are attempting to stop throwovers from happening. We also put out a bulletin recently to work with our local sheriff's departments and police departments. Hey, if y'all are stopping someone and you see them rolled in duct tape, if you see cell phones, multiple cell phones, they're trying to bring them into the prison. It doesn't matter if you're in one of our areas or not. That's what's happening. And the amount of reports that we've received from local police departments has been huge, with us being able to assist them on these cases and stop all of this contraband from coming in.
Can the drug dogs not detect in the mailroom?
They can.
Drug? I mean, that seems like if that's a major source place, then that would seem pretty easy.
Yeah.
I know everything's not easy. I'm just saying it would seem.
Yeah, a lot of times, sometimes they can. I mean, it just depends on how it's being entered and whether the dog can detect it or not. We also have been charging our officers and inmates more harshly when they're trying to introduct contraband into our facilities. We have really been moving forward on making sure that if they are introducing any type of contraband, that we're going to charge them criminally. We've worked really closely with the DAs in the different counties and making sure that they're working with us to charge them, to make sure they are aware, hey, if you do this, you're going to be, if you are on a sentence, it's going to be extended. And if you are out, you're going to get charged again criminally. And we proactively, in our intelligence unit, we proactively monitor offenders. We listen into their GTL calls. We also have the JPay system, which I kind of touched on a little bit. I don't know how much of y'all are aware of it, but we have the inmate tablets, which our offenders have, and they communicate on that. And that's kind of, I think the hope is that it would help with the cell phones, and it somewhat has, because we can monitor them 24/7 on what they're saying on these. So they are communicating on the tablets just like they would on a cell phone, and they email their family and friends out on the outside about what's happening in prison. So we have, in the Intel unit, we have analysts dedicated to monitor our JPay system as well. And that has helped us to pick up on what's going to happen. I get daily reports from them, and daily they receive about 15 to 20 emails where they were discussing green dot cards, JPay, discussing money, and that's just from what they were reading. So I think it's helped somewhat, but we're fighting crime here. So, but that's all I have. If y'all have any more questions.
Well, it's a haunting review that you actually gave to us.
Hers was so positive and like positivity.
Trick or treat.
We our hats are off to you. You have a tremendously difficult job, and you're right. I was just thinking about how dangerous prisons, how many dangerous people are in prison, but the fact of the matter is you guys have done a pretty good job limiting the rest for it not to really be a danger in prison, but it's always lurking.
Always.
Yeah. Thank you for coming and sharing that with us.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Good job. Thank you. I'd like to thank Lindsay for coming here today and presenting to the board. Again, as we as a board reach out to educate our criminal justice partners and our stakeholders on our processes and what it is that we do and the benefits that we provide the public, we're actually also bringing in our stakeholders and our criminal justice partners so that we can learn where their pain points are, what they are facing, what their biggest obstacles are, and how we might assist in that. So again, I want to say thank you for being here and shining some light on not the happy fuzzy side. I'd have just a few comments before I'll turn it back over to the board or open up for questions. I'd like to highlight just a few things that we have done since the last board meeting in reference to our 4 operational priorities. Again, engaging our stakeholders, educating where possible, encouraging their active participation, and enhancing our process. Since October the 4th, we continue to push our dialogue with representatives, sheriffs, judges, local community leaders. We have presented at the District Attorneys Association up at Brasstown Valley, and that was hosted by the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. We conducted again the Victims Visitors Day, headed up by Shalandra in cooperation with Stephen Bradley, the DA down in the Milledgeville area. We were invited and made a presentation to the Joint Sentencing and Probation Subcommittees for the Criminal Justice Reform Council. They will have a full council meeting tomorrow, which we will be at, again, to answer questions and provide guidance when it comes to parole matters. We met with a focus group of criminal defense attorneys from the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys, or lawyers, I guess it would be. Got input from them on the parole process and how we may engage them and have them actively involved in the process. And this past Friday, we actually went and presented at their fall conference. About 400 criminal defense attorneys and public defenders from across the state were there. Very good dialogue with them and really got some good information on how we think we can improve the parole process to, again, engage them in that process. We've met with the Southern Center for Human Rights, Chairman Barnard and clemency staff, so that they would have a greater understanding of the board of work and how they may become more actively involved. And we continue to look for those opportunities to engage our stakeholders and our criminal justice partners in what the board does and the effect we have on public safety here in Georgia. So that completes my report. I would like, if the board will allow me just a minute, to recognize this Friday, we will celebrate Veterans Day. And at this point, I'd like anybody in the room that has served in the United States Armed Forces to please stand up. Please stand up. Thank you for your service to our country and the freedoms that we so enjoy, and it's based on your dedication and service. So thank you. And with that, I'll conclude my comments.
Okay. Any questions from the members? Thank you, Chris. Excellent report. I see also from the Department of Community Supervision, Harris Childers is back there. Any report from DCS, Harris?
Nothing major. We did lose our Deputy Director of Field Services, Jay Sanders, to the Department of Corrections. He's been named Assistant Commissioner of Human Services. And Mark Moore is the Department of Corrections.
Excellent. Let us know how we can assist you if you see any areas that the board might be able to help you as you guys continue your service to us.
Thank you. Same here.
Thank you. Okay, our next item on the agenda is public comments. I would remind you that the board is not in a position to hear about individual offenders, but if you have questions or need answers to questions for individual offenders, we have a call line, which is 404-656-4661. But if there are any public comments to be made about any of the subject matters that we've discussed, and it was a large variety of subject matters today, now will be the time for those public comments, or those who wish to make public comments. Yes, ma'am. Would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Marlene Allen. I have two comments. One, it concerns me the young inmates that are coming in that may not already be involved in gangs, and how they are apparently intimidated into being in a gang. And when she was speaking of knowing that this one person was a known head of the gang person, I'm saying I hope that there are some things that are being done. I know this is a very big deal, but I think that some people get in there and they have to choose between, am I going to be killed by this gang or killed by that gang? And I don't know, of course I don't know what can be done, but I just want to bring it to the attention that I think that if I had a son that was going in, or a daughter, that would be a real, for maybe something that didn't have anything to do with gangs before. But that would be a real concern for me. And the other thing is that I just have a comment about cell phones. I'm wondering if they've ever thought about removing the method of recharging their phones. I mean, these guys have to recharge them to be able to use them. If there was no way to recharge them, wouldn't that take, and that's kind of like the law of supply and demand. I mean, it was just, so I just offer that as a thought.
Sure.
That you might want to think about, that if they can't charge them, they're not useful to them.
Understood.
And I don't know how many people get killed over not doing that, but don't tell them that I said that.
Yes.
Okay?
It's too late.
Take my name back.
Yes, ma'am. The board very much appreciates those comments, and many people in this area share those same thoughts and concerns. And there may be those which actually have some insight to those. And if you want to speak to the witness afterwards, you can talk with her and help her understand what's being done, if anything, to help with those comments. Any other comments on any of the matters discussed today? Hearing none, then this time the chair will accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. I thought for a moment we're going to stay here all day. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're officially adjourned. Thank you much.